What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. Time to take a look at the Big Ten and take a look back at the 2023 season and which teams are maybe better or worse than their record would suggest. Which teams are maybe overrated or underrated a little bit, again, based off of how these teams did in the one-score games. So how maybe things could have gone differently if they had won those one-score games or lost those one-score games, or if they split them right down the middle. So we're doing the Big Ten here, did the SEC yesterday. If you missed it, go back and watch that. Again, this can sometimes give us an indication of teams that are being overhyped or underhyped going into the next season. So yeah, we're looking back at last year, but also it's a way to kind of start looking ahead to next year and where these teams might wind up. So we look at the Big Ten East first, and this is last year when we did this last year. So Michigan was 2-0 in one-score games. So you would have expected maybe perhaps a bit of a drop off, but that did not happen. And then everyone else here, you know, it's within a game. So nothing really, pretty much even here in the Big Ten East as far as these one-score games. But take a look at the Big Ten West, totally different story. Actually, before we get to the Big Ten West from last year, from 2022, let's look at 2023 for the Big Ten East. And then again, I will show you the Big Ten West because it tells a different story, and we definitely could have learned a lot from that one. But again, East really didn't have any teams that were overhyped or underhyped going into the season. You could argue Michigan, but of course they were undefeated this year, won the national championship. So this is the records from this past season. And how did these teams do in one-score games? Michigan was again 2-0 in one-possession games, and I may not remember this correctly. I think it was Illinois was maybe one of those in 2022. They almost upset them, and I can't even remember the other game now, but anyways, 2-0 this past season. Those games, of course, coming against Maryland and then against Ohio State. Ohio State 2-1 in one-score games. Penn State 0-1. Maryland 1-3, so that would tell you maybe they were a little better than their record. Rutgers 1-0. Michigan State 2-1, and Indiana 2-4. They were not good in the one-score games. And, that shows you that it could have been a much different year for the Hoosiers. So how about if these teams won all of their one-score games? Michigan still would have been 12-0. Ohio State would have been 12-0. Their one loss was to Michigan, and it was in a one-score game. So if they'd found a way to win that game, of course, they would have been undefeated. Penn State could have gone 11-1. You look at Maryland right there. Could have gone 10-2 if they had won all of their one-score games. And yes, we have seen teams go 4-0 in one-possession games. Missouri and Ole Miss out of the SEC did it this past season. So Maryland was not that far away from having a really, really good year. Rutgers, they still would have been 6-6 because they won their only one-score game. Michigan State could have been 5-7, a little bit better. But look at Indiana, could have gone 7-5 if they would have found a way to win those close games. But obviously that did not happen. So let's go now to how about if these teams lost all of their one-score games? So this would have been the worst case scenario for this past season. Michigan could have gone 10-2, and they lose those two close games. Could have gone 10-2. Ohio State could have gone 9-3. Penn State also 9-3. Maryland a little bit worse at 6-6. Rutgers could have missed a bowl game. Michigan State at 2-10, and Indiana could have been 1-11. So if they split these games, all these one-score games, which is maybe, and I don't want to read too much into this because sometimes it tells a lot, sometimes it doesn't from year to year. But if you look at how they would have done if they had split those one-score games, maybe this is what their record truly should have been this past season as far as comparing the teams. And you see Michigan would have been 11-1. Ohio State and Penn State would have been right there, both teams at 10.5 and 1.5. Maryland would have been 8-4. Rutgers 5.5 wins. Michigan State 3.5 wins, and then Indiana at 4-8. So again, not a huge, nothing really jumps out here in the Big Ten East. No one had like in the SEC, we had Ole Miss and Missouri at 4-0. Nothing like that. But if you look at the Big Ten West, again, this is where it's a little bit of a different story. So you go back to 2022 and take a look at this. Purdue 5-2 in one-score games. That would have told us that maybe they were a little overrated and you can expect a drop off. And obviously there were other factors, a new head coach and all that. But we saw a big drop off with Purdue. Illinois, maybe you expect them to do a lot better because they were just 1-4, but no, they actually did worse. And they were terrible at getting one-score games. I'll show you that in just a second. You see Minnesota, Iowa 2-3, Wisconsin 1-3. You expect them to maybe do better, maybe win some of those closer games. They did have a better season. Nebraska, we'd expected them to have a better season, a little bit better. And then there's Northwestern, 1-5. 1-5. So as bad as this team was in 2022, they lost a lot of close games. And that can tell us that maybe Northwestern would turn things around, have a better year in 2023. And again, there are other factors in there, new head coach and all that. It's not just about these numbers, but they did turn it around. And so we look for those kind of patterns as we head into 2024, and you can see some again in the Big Ten West. So these were the records, and now we'll look at the one-score games. And there is Iowa at 5-1. 5-1. So very fortunate to be 10-2, and I think most people would agree that this was not a great 10-2 team. And maybe that means things are not going to be good for them. Maybe there's a big drop-off. Maybe they lose some of those close games in 2024. You do have to give teams credit, though, for winning close games. I mean, you got to give them credit for doing that. Northwestern at 5-2. They turned things around in a big, big way. Were able to win the close games this year, and because of that, they flipped that record around, go 7-5. Much, much better season. Big surprise from Northwestern this past year. Wisconsin, they kind of turned theirs around a little bit and had a better year. Minnesota was 2-2. Nebraska, once again, struggling in the one-score games. At some point, you have to figure that Nebraska is going to have a year where they win these close games, and it's going to be totally different. And maybe this is the year, maybe it's not, but we just continue to see, whether it's Scott Frost, Matt Rule, no matter what, Nebraska just cannot win close games. I don't know what it is, but if they can get that figured out, again, we're talking about a team that could have had a really, really good year this past year. They were close in a lot of games. Illinois, they actually did better in the one-score games, so they did turn that around, but this team was just so bad that their record was 5-7. So even though they were able to win a lot of close games, they were blown out a lot, and all of their wins were one-score games. So Illinois was really pretty bad this past year. I can't explain it. I thought they were going to be much better. And then Purdue, again, big drop-off from them, but you also have to look at the changes that took place there. So again, this doesn't tell the whole story, but it's just something we like to look at, and it does sometimes give us an idea of teams that are going to be on the rise or maybe going to fall, or overhyped or underhyped, like I said earlier. So if these teams had won all their one-score games, Iowa would have been 11-1. Actually, could have made it to 11-1. Northwestern could have been 9-3. Wisconsin 8-4. Minnesota just 7-5. But look at Nebraska; they could have gone 8-4. And actually, I think that's not accurate. That should actually say 10-2. So my mistake there. They actually should be 10-2 because you take those 5 one-score losses, you count those as wins, and that gets you to 10-2. So I apologize to Nebraska fans there. Messed up my math there or something. I don't know. But anyways, you look at now Illinois. They could have gone 8-4. Could have been a better year for them, even though they were, they did well in the one-score games, but could have done even better. And then Purdue, they could have been 7-5. So it could have been a much different story here in this division. And now I'm starting to wonder if my math's going to be off here on the Nebraska side. But let's go to if these teams lost their one-score games. Iowa at 5-7. Could have missed a bowl game. If you lose all those close games, they don't even make it to a bowl game. Northwestern could have been 2-10. So what a different season it could have been if they had done what they did in 2022 and lost those close games. Wisconsin could have gone 5-7. Minnesota 3-9. Nebraska could have been 4-8, not much worse. Illinois could have been 0-12. Again, every win for them was a one-score game, and Purdue could have been 2-10. So like I said on Nebraska here, 8-4, 4-8. That's going to tell us that if you split the one-score games, they'd be 6-6. But that's actually not correct because it should be 10-2 and 4-8, which would actually mean 7-5 would have been the record for Nebraska, which is actually what we have here. So I got that number right. I guess I mistyped there on the one if they had won all their one-score games. But you look if they split, Iowa would have been 8-4, Northwestern 5.5 wins, Wisconsin 6.5. Tells us maybe Wisconsin really was better than Northwestern. Minnesota still would have been 5-7. Again, Nebraska would have been 7-5, so would have been a much, much better season for them. And again, that 8-4 number should say 10-2, but 7-5. So actually, Nebraska, based off of this, maybe was the second best team in this division, and some would argue that this team was close. They were very close. Illinois 4-8, and then Purdue 4.5 and 7.5. So they still, actually Illinois would have been at the bottom, not Purdue. So again, this tells us as we head into next season, Iowa and Northwestern, look for them potentially to fall. Can Illinois fall more? We'll see. And watch for Nebraska to maybe be that team on the rise. Not saying all those things will happen, but the odds are that most of them will. And if I've done this for years, and if you've watched the videos, most of the time that is what happens. So we'll see. But interesting in the Big Ten, obviously, with the new teams coming in. Which teams do you think will turn things around in the one-score games, or maybe not be so lucky and kind of go the other way? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.